everyone, welcome to the last of our Glen Ira City Council Arts and Culture Isolation sewing tutorials. My name's Jennifer Anderson. I am from Soul Stitch's sewing classes and I have enjoyed presenting to you the last 7 tutorials. If you haven't already seen those tutorials, you can go to the Glen Ira Arts and Culture Facebook page and have a look at the video section, or you can go to the Soul Stitch's website and go follow through the links there. Today we are going to be learning how to make a drawstring bag, and one of the extra skills I'm going to teach you today is actually how to do French seams, which means a seam that is fully enclosed on itself. So if you don't have an overlocker, you will be able to make things that have really nicely finished edges on the inside. So I'm going to put up a slide now for you to have a look at so that you can get all the bits and pieces that you need, and then I will come back and we will make the pattern. For the purposes of today, we're just going to use an A4 sheet of paper for our pattern. You can make this as big or as small as you want. If you're wanting to use a particular type of fabric, you can make it, these can be made really small for little gift bags. You can make them really big for Santa sack type things. So for today, just to show you the construction technique, I'm going to use this A4 sheet of paper. So this is what our pattern will look like when we are completed, which is basically just an A4 sheet of paper. But we do have to put some markings on it. So we're going to measure down from the top 3.5 centimeters, and this will be the mark for our fold line to make our casing. So we're just going to measure down here 3.5 centimeters. I'm just going to draw a little line across there. And we are going to actually put a little nick here, when we've finished. Now we're going to also measure down 2.5 centimeters down here. 2 centimeters. We are just going to measure down here 2 centimeters from this line. So 5.5 from the top, or 2 from this line here. And then we are going to measure up 5 centimeters from here. That doesn't really matter. It's actually just for where we're going to mark to put our little tab. So it doesn't really matter whether you have it down lower or up a little bit higher, but 5 centimeters is a good mark. This little mark here we have left is for our opening for our cord to go through. And this line here is our fold to make our casing. Okay, now this one, once again, the same as some of the other patterns we've made, is a place on fold. So it is, we're not going to be having a seam on the bottom here. All right, so now that we have all our markings on our pattern, there's our little mark for our tab, that's our mark for our opening, and this is our mark for our fold along here. So now we are going to go ahead and cut our fabric out. I'm going to use this piece of fabric here, so I'm just going to fold it in half and put my pattern on top. Line it up really nicely with the folded edge. If you wanted to, you could pin this around here and cut it out with a pair of scissors. I am just going to use my blade and my ruler and my cutting mat. Okay, so there we are, all cut out. Very easy, very simple. Before we take our pattern off our fabric, we're just going to mark our little nick here. That's for our tab. and this is for our opening up here and for our folded edge. Okay, good idea sometimes when you're doing something on a fold like this, just to put a little nick into the bottom there, or a little nick in there. You can also do this with just a pencil or a piece of dressmaker's chalk if you have that. Okay, so now that we have cut that out, we are going to go over to the sewing machine and put it together. We are going to do is sew down our side seam. Now this is a little bit different to what we've always done previously and what you're used to doing probably. We're actually going to sew with the wrong sides together to start off with. So you're sewing the wrong sides together. Now we want to be sewing on the side that doesn't have the little nicks. So the little nicks that we did with our pattern, we're going to sew on the side to start off with that doesn't have those little nicks. So we're going to sew our first set, well, I'll pin it first, and we're going to sew from the bottom to the top, so from our folded edge down to the top here, and we're going to sew a 5mm seam, so very small seam, unlike what you're used to doing. We're starting with a reverse stitch and finishing with a reverse stitch at the very end here, 5mm. Okay, so you should have a very small seam running down here, and then we're going to go over to the ironing board and we're going to give that a press. Before we do that, I'm just going to do one more thing around here. We're going to stitch a 5mm stitching line around the top here, which is just going to help us be able to fold this over. So 5mm with your no pinning or anything, because it's just stitching this like this opened out. All that does is give us a little line to use as a folding edge. It's just very helpful when you're doing hemming or something like that to use that as a folded edge. Okay, so we're just going to go to the iron and press this flat, and this is the way that we do our French seams. So you need to open your little bag up like this, and we're going to press it flat from the inside. Get the nose right down into the point there, making sure that it's really nice and flat. And then you're going to turn it so that it is right side to right side, and you are going to press that nice and flat like that. So we're going to press that down there like that so that the raw edges are enclosed. Now, if you didn't stitch a 5mm seam, you may find that you need to trim your raw edge off a little bit, or if you have fabric that is very sort of frayed on the edge, you may need to trim it off. So what we're going to do now, we don't need to pin this, we're going to do a reverse stitch here, and we're going all the way down to the bottom, and that is going to enclose all those raw edges on the inside so that when we open it out, it will be nice and neat. So what you need to do now is stitch down here, and you need to be mindful of your raw edge on the inside. You need to make sure that you're stitching a couple of millimeters over to the left of where you can feel the ridge of where your raw edge is here. And if you have stitched the previous one correctly at about 5mm, then you're going to go about 7mm, reverse stitch all the way to the end and reverse stitch. So now we have our seam down here, and when we turn that in the right way, poke our little corner out, you can use your chopstick Poke your corner out so that it's nice and square. And you can see that we have a lovely seam down here that doesn't have any raw edges. And on the wrong side, it's beautifully enclosed there like that. So now we're going to go back over to the iron and we're going to press our casing down. It's just easier to press this when it's one flat piece rather than when it's stitched up. So we're going to do that now. So we did this little row of stitching across the top here, which enables us to fold this over really easily. It's much easier than trying to do it freehand. So we're just going to fold it over so that that row of stitching is right on the edge there. Should be about 5 millimeters. You just want to be able to just see that little row of stitching on the inside. Okay, now we are going to fold this edge down here, right in line with that little nick that we did previously. You may need to use a tape measure or a ruler and just make sure that it's really nice and even all the way along. So this, we're just going to put on our little piece of tape that's going to create the loop for your cord to go through. Now you should have your little marking on about 5 centimeters from the folded edge at the bottom here. So this is what it's going to look like. And we're going to put our piece of tape on there. This is the top, this is the folded edge on the bottom. Obviously this is inside out. So there's our little nick there. Now you want to have your piece of tape, you want to fold it in half like that. Now if you need to, you can do a row of stitching across there to hold it together. And what we're going to do is we're going to put that on to this side of our bag here in line with that little 5 centimeter nick. I'm just going to put a pin in there and I'm going to do a row of stitching on there. So we've got our little tab on there now, which is going to sit like that. So I'm just going to hold that up and show you. That's it, inside out. So you should have your tab like that. Now, once again, we're going to do wrong side to wrong side, and we're going to do our 5 millimeter stitch. Now this time we are not going to go all the way up to the top. We're only going up to the second nick. So we had a nick here, a little marking there where our fold line was. So this is the bit that we pressed. And we had a second one down here. That's the mark that we're going to stitch to now. So we're going to go from the bottom here and we're going to go all the way up to that nick there. So it's probably a good idea to put a pin in so that you remember where you're going to stop. And we're going to stitch that all the way up there, 5 millimeters. Okay, so now we're going over to the ironing board and we're going to give that another press and then turn it through again. It's a little bit trickier this time, but you just need to poke the nose of your iron into your bag. Obviously, if you're working with something a bit smaller, it's going to be a bit tricky and depends on the size of your iron. So once again, just fold that pressed edge up like that, getting that edge really nice and flat there. You can feel the ridge of your tape inside here where you've got your little tape loop. Press that again so it's nice and flat, and then we're going to stitch that one the same as on the other side. So we're doing the same thing now where we're going from the bottom, but we're only going up to this little nick here. And we are stitching about 7 millimeters. So basically, once again, you're trying to enclose your raw edges. Now where you've got, this is what it should look like now. You've got your pressed edge that's folded over like this. And so what we need to do now is finish off a little edge here so that that's nice and sits nicely there. And we're going to do a little nick in here. So we're going to chop into where you had your row of stitching here. So just chop right into where your row of stitching is, just there. Don't cut the stitching, just chop into there. And then we are going to stitch from the bottom nick here, the top nick here. So we're going to stitch from there, fold this open, and we're going to stitch all the way to the top. Now we need our stitching line to be in line with that row of stitching there. So if you have done 5 millimeters and then 7 millimeters, you're going to need to stitch in about 1.2 millimeters up here. It needs to be in line with this row of stitching here, all the way up there. If you need to draw yourself a line, draw yourself a line and then stitch up there. And we are going to go over to the ironing board and we are going to press this open. And there's our little hole for our cord to go through. Okay, so this is, we've pressed that over and we are now going to press this nice and flat and fold that over. We need to do a row of stitching down here to keep this really nice and flat, which we will do in a second. We're just going to fold this over and give it a good press. If you have a pressing ham or a towel, you could use that. If you're doing one that's quite small and you can't get, it's awkward, you can use your pressing ham. I'll just turn it in the right way. It's probably a little bit easier. There's our tab. Now what we need to do here is we need to do a row of stitching down across our opening. There's our little opening there. So we're going to do a row of stitching, keeping the edge of your foot, your sewing foot here, in line with the crease in the middle here. So I'll do that and then I'll show you what I've done. We're going to leave our needle in. We're going to lift up our foot, turn it around so it's sideways and go across maybe 4 stitches. Just count and just go really slowly. If you want to, you can hand dial that. Make sure your needle is in. Lift up your foot again. Turn it around so you're going back in the other direction and then keep going to the end. Probably should have used a contrasting thread so you could have seen it a little bit better, but basically it's we've stitched a U and there is our opening, so it's enclosed that opening so that it's going to be sit really nicely. So now what we're going to do is turn it inside out and it should be beautifully pressed, and because we have that row of stitching around there, it's going to keep it sitting really nicely. Now you can pop a couple of pins into here and make sure that it's sitting really nice and flat. There should be no twisting or tunneling. It should just sit really nice and flat. And we are going to start off at a seam. Now if you have a machine that allows you to have a free arm, you can take that off like that and put it onto here. If you don't have a machine that does that, you're better off turning it in this way and stitching with all of your fabric up above you here. So you're stitching in there with all of this up here. But I have the free arm, so I'm going to do it this way. This is great for if you're ever hemming pants or anything like that where you've got something small that you need to fit in. Now what you need to be doing here is stitching a row of stitching about 2 millimeters from this edge here, and we're going to go all the way around. So you're going to start off at this seam here and about 2 millimeters from the edge on the folded over piece, you are going to go all the way around. I'm coming around here to where I started, so I'm just going to stitch over that maybe 3 stitches and then do another reverse stitch. Now if you want to, you can do a row of stitching around the top here. I think it looks really good if you stitch maybe 1 centimeter from the edge, and then you get that really nice ruffled look. So, but you don't have to do that, but I'm going to do that on my one. So once again, starting off at the seam, stitch over where you started and then do another reverse stitch. Okay, now we are going to go over to the bench and I will show you how to put your cord in. Now that we've finished our sewing, we're going to turn that through into the right way. And as you can see, we have our little tab on the end, on the side here, and you should have beautifully enclosed French seams here. So that's what it should look like on the outside. Just looks like a regular seam on the outside, but on the inside you have your beautifully enclosed raw edges. So very good technique to know. So we're just going to put our, I'm using this narrow tape for my cord. You could also use cord. This one here has a very nice velvet shoelace with nice little ends on it. You can use anything really. To actually insert the cord or whatever you're using, ribbon, you can use ribbon. You can use anything. You can use this is a little bodkin that is just in, you can get at the sewing store. You can use a safety pin. Does depend how big your casing is here as to whether a safety pin's going to fit through. You may need to use a small safety pin, although that is a little bit trickier. I've even used a bobby pin where I've tied it on when I've been desperate. So one of these is ideal, I think. So you putting it into the little hole that you've left when we did that little stitching with at the top of where we left the little opening. So you put it into there and you're going all the way around. So feed it in and then pull it through, feed it through. Now if you think you've gotten stuck here and you think you've sewed it closed, you probably haven't. It's probably just that you have fed it into your seam. So just give it a little bit of a jiggle around and see if you can get it through. Okay, keep going until you come out the other side there and keep pulling it through. Now the length of your cord that you cut should be double the width of your bag and approximately double the length. It depends how much of a tail you like to have. And then you get one end and poke it through, which I should have done before I took the bodkin out. Poke that through there and then tie off your ends. Now if you want to be really clever, there we go. So there you go, that one, really nice little drawstring bag. Obviously that's just a little mini one. If you want to be really clever, you can do the same thing here that you did with the tab, leave an opening the same as what you did on this side, put a tab on here, and then you have one that has the double ties. So you would just thread your tie through the opposite way to what this one is. And then you have the double ties. If you make it bigger, you make it out of something a little bit more sturdy, it can be like a backpack. You often see things like that the kids carry their swimwear around in. So this one here is one that's a little bit bigger, would be a good size for that sort of thing. This one here measures, just to give you an idea, finished. The finished measurement of that one is about 30 centimeters by about 35 centimeters. So that's a really nice size if you wanted to do something like that. You can make them for little small gift bags, a little bit trickier to manipulate on the machine and with the iron, as you saw. This one here is actually an old tea towel. So that is, and that, the ideal thing about that is that on the inside, the seams are already finished off for you really nicely. Now this one is a little bit different because I put my fold, I wanted to utilize the tea towel like that. So it's actually, if that was my tea towel, I folded it that way and I put my casing across the top here. So my fold was on one side here and I have stitched across the bottom and up the side. But a great way to use some really nice linen tea towels and make really good for making shoe bags and things. If you want to go next level, you can do one with panels in it. So if you don't have a big enough piece of fabric, cut some up and sew them together. This is another one that really great use for them and a great way to practice your French seams. This is I make these for so I don't have to use plastic produce bags. It's just made out of tulle, and I make lots of them and then just put the little cotton tab and then just hook them together with a ring to take to the supermarket. So all that is a piece of tulle like that, folded in half, and then French seams down both sides. Another awesome thing which we are coming around to is Santa sacks. So you make them even bigger than that, embroider on the front of them or do some patchwork or something and put it on the front, and that's a really good thing to use them for as well. This is the last of the tutorials I'll be running with the Glen Ira City Council Arts and Culture team. I hope you've all enjoyed the tutorials. If you haven't seen them already, make sure you go to the Glen Ira City Council Arts and Culture video section of their Facebook page, or you can check out the videos through my website, the Soul Stitches website. I would just like to say thank you to everyone who sent some really positive messages, and it's been great to follow along with the photographs that you've all been sending in to show me what you have been making. I hope you all continue sewing and continue to practice some of the new skills that you have learned, and thank you very much for taking part. See you later.